Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to go over module number 2, the manuscript, writing, editing, and much more. Please remember that this module is also available on audio only, so you can follow along on the go. If you have printed out your course workbook, either in black and white or color, you can follow along and take notes as I go through this module. Let's get started. So, why do people have a book out? Well, the first one is because people would like to earn an income. I do need to stop on this first point and make it known that you will not get wealthy writing a book. Okay, I know that sounds really harsh, but it's really important to believe that only a very small percentage of people will become wealthy with writing a book. I'll give you an example. 50 Shades of Grey. The author self-published that book, and then a publisher picked it up and started selling it and marketing in a different way, and it took off like wildfire. Turned into a motion picture. Is that author wealthy from her book? Absolutely. Let's take J.K. Rowling. She was in a very dark place. I think it was her mother who was ill. She wrote Harry Potter actually on a train. And she was on welfare at the time. She was very poor. She submitted it to, I believe it was over 100 different publishers. So many people turning her down. I can't imagine how many people are, regretting that moment. But Harry Potter was slow to start. And, she probably did not think she was going to be where she is today when she wrote that very first Harry Potter book. So I believe it will earn you an income, but I need to be honest that it takes work, it takes hustle, it takes dedication. And I think that when you have passion and purpose behind the book and not just, I want to write a book to make money, I think with passion and purpose, it actually drives you in a different way when you're marketing and selling your book. And I believe that will make you successful in selling more books and making more income, rather than I'm going to write a book and this is going to be my career and I'm going to make money. The next reason why people have a book out is because they can establish themselves as an expert. So let's say you're a public speaker, and I have a client actually who he is a speaker on health. So his target market is actually baby boomers. And so he wrote a couple books to establish him as an expert and to get more speaking engagements and to be able to charge more for his speaking engagements, because now he has these books to say, look, I have all this information, this valuable content that I have shared in these books. It's backed by medical doctors. It's backed by experiences. And so he is more of an expert now when he is being hired for speaking engagements, and he can charge a larger fee. And that goes along with number 3 is result in speaking engagements. And finally, having a book out can help you to spread your important message to a large audience, making an impact in the world. And this is really the reason why I wrote that book. I had a full-time teaching job. I had no desire, and I had no plan to leave my teaching career. I thought I would be a teacher forever. I thought I would retire as a teacher. But when I got the idea to write a children's book, it was because of the message. I thought, gosh, this would be really cool to get this message that you get to have the courage to be yourself no matter what, out to as many kids as possible. And when I got that book out and I started really believing in that message, I thought, wow, if I sell more books, the message goes to more children and it gets out to more people across the world, and it makes more of a difference. And so that really became my passion and my purpose. Let's talk about the 8 steps to writing your book. So you can write this down, follow along, but we're going to dig deep on each of these 8 steps. I've broken it down into just 8 simple steps for you to follow to go from idea to manuscript. So this is really the how-to in all of modules 1 through 5 of how to actually write the book. The first one is you need to pick a genre. So let's say you decide you want to write a young adult novel. That's awesome, but I want you to really research the market. And we talked a little bit about this. I don't want you to write a book that's already been written. Are there other books like mine about self-esteem and courage and for children? Absolutely. But there is not a book that is exactly like mine. They don't have a Lucy and a Ralph. So when I wrote my book, I made sure that my characters were unique and that my storyline was not similar to another storyline that was out there. I made sure that it looks different. It's a very unique look on the book. The illustrations, I worked with the illustrator to make sure that they're unique illustrations. And the book is actually, a small moment from my life. So that really brought a lot out into the book as well. But you want to research the market. You want to make sure that if you're writing a book, there's not an exact title, there's not a super close similar storyline out there. Next is to make a plan. How often are you going to write, daily or weekly? I want you to really look at your calendar and block off time in your schedule to make this happen. I think this is probably the most challenging part. People say they don't have time. I don't believe that. You have to make time. Look at your schedule and plan it, schedule it. I had a friend who wrote a young adult novel and she had a full-time job. She came home 2 to 3 nights a week after her full-time job, had dinner with her husband, and would sit down and write. And she wouldn't stop until she got to a certain word count. And you can Google word counts, but there's certain suggestions as to, if you're writing a young adult novel, how many words per day or per session of writing do you need to really get down in order to complete your book in a certain period of time. So instead of saying in 2016, I want to write a book, I want you to say, okay, in January, I'm going to write 2 chapters of my book. In February, I'm going to write another 2 chapters. I'm going to complete this for the first 6 months of the year. The second 6 months of the year, I'm going to be editing those chapters and working with a professional editor. So something like that, really just blocking off that time so that you can make it happen. Stephen King said, if you don't have time to read, you don't have time or the tools to write. So as much as you want to be writing your book, make sure that you're also reading books too and making time for that passion. And learning about the different genres and getting ideas and getting a feel for the craft of different writers. Next is to outline your story. Start with your ending first, then outline the plot. What is the primary problem and how do the events lead up to the solution of that problem? What is the main message of your book and who is your audience? So really you want to, when you develop your characters and you develop an outline and you start really mapping things out, the main message of your book should be clear in your head. And you should really, I loved the idea of starting with your ending first, okay? Outlining the plot. You can actually use templates that are on the internet. You can create your own template. I personally love taking a blank piece of paper and getting different colored sticky notes. I write characters on one sticky note. I write setting on another sticky note with some ideas of different places that this story might take place. And I map that out on separate sticky notes, put it on the piece of paper, and I kind of move them around. Then I start connecting things with arrows, and this is kind of my way of outlining the story. But there are beautiful templates out there that you can get online for free to help you outline your story. Next is to develop your characters. So you want to spend time writing a character biography. Who is your character? An exercise that you can do is, one is writing the biography of your character. Another one is write a letter to your character as if they're your friend, or write a letter as your character to someone else. So start getting the relationship of your character and maybe someone else in their life down. So this is what I did when I was writing Spaghetti in a Hot Dog Bun. My editor had me write a letter from Lucy to her grandfather, just to start getting the voice of the character. Who is she and what is she like? What does she like to do in the morning? What is her morning routine? What kind of feelings does she have? What kind of quirks does she have? You know, what are her worries? What are her hopes and dreams for the future? You want to know these things about your characters because these are the things that the people reading your book, your audience, your readers, are actually going to be thinking about as they read a story. This is Walter Norbert Whipplemore. This is my illustrator. who was Dawn, and Dawn Beacon was actually developing the character here. And so you can see that illustrators develop characters as well. They take time to look at them from different angles. They take time to look at them from different views. Walter Norbert was a character who was named after my husband's grandfather, Walter Norbert. And we talked about the character being this boy who had messy clothes, messy hair. He looked different than other kids. But the main point of this character, Walter Norbert, is that he had a heart of gold. He was kind, he was generous. So we spent a lot of time thinking about who this character was, and the illustrator and I talking about what he might look like. Next is to write your first draft. Okay, so you may have, remember this course is for anyone writing any type of book. So your first draft might take you months. Your first draft might take you minutes. Your first draft might take you a couple of weeks. So we don't know. I am just telling you what it looks like to go from idea to book, any type of book. So some of my suggestions for writing your first draft, and I don't have them written down here because I want to tell you what they are. Writing your first draft. You might write your first draft without any editing. Just let your creative juices flow, get the ideas out on paper, and then maybe a few days later, go back and start editing and start fixing your punctuation, what have you. But try to really let your creativity get into that first draft without worrying about the structure of the sentences and the paragraphs and the formatting. Let all of that come later. Take your time to write the first draft and just let the creativity come into it. Also, on writing your first draft, don't be afraid to put it away for several days or several weeks until you go back to it. Don't be afraid to throw away your first draft. It's been done. I've done it. I've actually done a few first drafts. I don't think that's what they're called after you do it a few times. And I've actually moved on from a story after trying to get that first draft a few times, saying, you know what? This story's not going to work for me. I'm moving on. That's okay. Ernest Hemingway said, there is nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed. I love this quote because this is what I'm talking about. Don't put so much thought into the actual structure of your writing. Please just get those thoughts, those ideas down into paper. Get your message, the passion, the purpose of why you're writing this story. Just let that happen and then worry about the rest later. Here's the rest, revising and editing. So some of the suggestions, consider the following. Is the story enjoyable to read? So after you've put it down, you're going to sit back and you're going to reread it. If you were one of your readers, your audience, would you enjoy the story? Take a step back and look at it from their perspective. Try to not be attached to it when you're going back and revising and editing. I will tell you, when I first wrote Spaghetti in a Hot Dog Bun, and I first met with an editor, they asked me to cut the story in half. And that was so challenging because I was emotionally tied to my manuscript. And I felt like taking words out, it hurt me. It actually was like painful to take words out. But this is all part of the process. The next one is, will my audience connect with the characters? And is the story creative and will it stand out? Okay, so you want to consider these things when you're revising, you're adding details, you might be taking details away, and you're editing. Remember, show, don't tell. You want to really show your audience what is happening instead of telling. Let me go back and give you an example of show, don't tell. For example, I'll keep it very simple. Instead of saying, my room was messy, you might say, my room was a disaster. There were clothes thrown all over the place. It looked like a tornado hit. That is showing and not just telling. That's what I'm talking about, and that is a very important craft in writing a good story. Don't forget, write a one-sentence summary of your book. This is called the elevator pitch. You might do that before your story is completed, or you might do it after you've finished writing your story. If you were to walk into an elevator the door closes and there is, the CEO of the #1 publisher that you want to be accepted by, maybe you're pitching traditional publishers, you have about 20 seconds to tell that CEO what your book is about. Go. What would you say? Come up with a title for your book. Come up with a working title is what I'm going to say, because the working title is going to change. I need you to think about the title, the cover artwork, and the first lines, because those are crucial to the success of your book. You walk into a bookstore. There are hundreds of thousands of books in that store. Some of them are sad because they're sitting on the shelf and their covers aren't even facing out. Some of them are lucky to have their covers facing out for their audience or for the readers. Think about how important the title is to grabbing that customer's attention, the cover. And then if they are happy with the title and the cover, they're going to pick that book up. They're going to open it and they're going to read the first few lines. They're going to read those first few lines, and that's going to make or break the sale. So you really want to spend a lot of time on your title, your cover artwork, and those first few lines. Now, if you are traditionally publishing, you're not going to have a lot of control over your title and cover artwork. However, if you're self-publishing, I want you to really utilize friends and family on your title suggestion and your cover artwork. See what they think. Would it grab their attention? Next is to share your story with someone, and I kind of just talked about that. You can share with family and friends, but joining a local critique group is a really important suggestion. You can meet, I think they meet monthly. Some of them meet, a couple times, maybe once a quarter, but being able to share your story with other people and get their ideas, their suggestions. Now, this is really neat. Recently, I heard that they do online critique groups too. And so people will email back and forth their suggestions, their ideas, so you can do a virtual critique group. But don't be afraid to share your story with someone. Next would be to hire a professional editor, and this should not say Johnny Appleseed. Hire a professional editor. I cannot stress this enough. I talked about it in module number 1, but it is super duper important to hire a professional editor.